are facing the same challenges from Russia. Some countries, like Baltic countries, really under the threat of territorial aggression, of on-land operation. And I personally believe that Putin would like to provoke situation on the borders with the Baltic countries just to show that NATO means nothing. But the same with United Kingdom, with countries which are far away from Russian borders, to have hybrid war, to have cyber war, to provoke explosion on the production facilities of weapons, to have crisis on financial market and so on and so forth.
There we go. Let's stay with Ukraine now, because the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has said the next few days will be very important for peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. The comments came at a meeting, an Oval Office meeting no less, with the Norwegian Prime Minister, where Trump admitted he was frustrated with both Moscow and Kiev.
I think we're going to get peace. We want to save 5,000 young people. I used to say 2,500. I now say 5,000. We have, Mr. Prime Minister, we have about 5,000 young people a week that are dying in that ridiculous war. And, I started out because I didn't like all the money that we were paying, and then I realized how many people were dying. And that's by far the more important element right now. I'm saying we can save thousands of people. And I don't like that it takes long at all, but I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so.
Well, that frustration, that urgency from Trump followed a post early this morning on his Truth Social account where he said, "Vladimir, stop," in response to an intense overnight attack on Ukraine from the Kremlin. Those comments came just hours after the US president accused Volodymyr Zelensky of harming peace negotiations. So, where do talks on a ceasefire go from here? We're all confused. Where are they going to go? I've been speaking to Serhiy Leshchenko, an advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff.
Ukraine sacrificed so much for our territorial integrity, for our future, for our European values, and for our future European membership, that, of course, Ukraine is the country which should be supported and protected by democratic world. And President Zelensky doing his best to achieve this.
In the last hour, in a news conference with the Norwegian Prime Minister, Donald Trump from the Oval Office said he had no allegiance to either side. How do you respond to that?
I'm not going to commend President Trump. I'm not working for U.S. administration. I'm an advisor of Ukrainian presidential office.
All right. The Ukrainians, including President Zelensky, have said that they want to see, you want to see, more pressure on Russia to achieve a ceasefire. What kind of pressure do you think would persuade President Putin to stop these attacks on civilian targets in Ukraine?
Ukraine is always in the position to argue with our partners to explain that every promised support should be delivered in time. In 2022, a few days before the war started in Munich, our president called U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris to provide Ukraine with weapons and with sanctions against Russia. In these circumstances, the war would never can happen. And in that time, unfortunately, Ukraine did not receive what was expected to be delivered. And it did not stop Russia from aggression, but only provoked Putin for the further aggression. And this is very important to receive everything needed in time. And unfortunately, if you read the books from that period describing what happened, the U.S. administration was more interested to advise Ukraine to find another European capital to have government in exile instead of to provide Ukraine with weapons and impose sanctions against Russia. So it's always happened this way, and that is why Ukraine is always saying that time is very important. All sanctions should be imposed in the moment when it's really needed. And now it's also very important to receive this message to impose sanctions against Russia, to stop the Russian regime earn money from energy sources, to stop Russian regime to finance this war from money, which they partly receive from Western partners, and to really put really strong pressure on Russia to release Ukrainian hostages, Ukrainian prisoners of war, Ukrainian kids, and to have a ceasefire on the land. If you remember, 46 days ago, we had a meeting in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine was very skeptical, saying that Russia would never accept ceasefire on the land. And our delegation traveled to Saudi Arabia with the position that let's have first stage ceasefire on air and on sea. But American partners said, our president would like to have a total ceasefire, and Ukraine answered, after the contact of our negotiator with Kiev, with our capital, that no problem, we're ready to agree. We're ready to provide our exceptions for this. We don't want to be obstacle for peace. If you as a partners, if you as the American government ready to put pressure on Putin to really have ceasefire on the land, we totally agree on this. And then 1 month and a half passed and nothing happened like this. So it means that really pressure should be really strong on Putin, sanctions, and provide Ukraine with weapons, with financial support to produce weapons in Ukraine, to make Ukraine as a real stakeholder of European security. Because believe me, Putin is not interested just in some cities or villages of Ukrainian land. He's interested to destroy global order and to provoke collapse of Euro-Atlantic security system.
Well, the situation this week, though, Serhiy, is that the Americans pulled out of the much-anticipated meeting in London today because they knew that Kiev would not accept the 7 points of Trump's plan, including recognition of Crimea as Russian territory, the de facto recognition of Russian advances and the ban on Ukraine joining Nato, etc. If the Americans decide to walk away, how confident are you that your European allies will step into the breach?
If I really believe that Ukraine is sharing the same values which were core of American society and American state when it was created by founding fathers. Ukraine shares democratic values. Ukraine is defending our territorial integrity and resisting the aggression of Russian dictatorship. And in these circumstances, we truly believe that the US should be on our side and support the same values we are sharing together. And of course, European Union, European countries, United Kingdom are also very important because we are living on the same part of the world and we are facing the same challenges from Russia. Some countries, like Baltic countries, really under the threat of territorial aggression, of on-land operation. And I personally believe that Putin would like to provoke situation on the borders with the Baltic countries just to show that NATO means nothing. But the same with United Kingdom, with countries which are far away from Russian borders, to have hybrid war, to have cyber war, to provoke explosion on the production facilities of weapons, to have crisis on financial market and so on and so forth. So we all facing the same challenge. It means we're facing the challenge of Russian aggression in hybrid form. And our partners did a lot to help Ukraine, European partners, and they have to be part of the negotiation table and to be guarantors of Ukrainian future. And guarantors that this aggression would never repeat in the future.
And finally, Serhiy, President Zelensky had to cut short his trip to South Africa to rush back to Ukraine following last night's Russian bombardment. How successfully do you think you're managing to persuade the global south, particularly African countries that were hesitant to support Ukraine, that your fight is also their fight? Because some of them have got close ties to Russia.
It's never enough. You're right that a lot of has to be done, but at the same time, we have a very, very clear result on the screen of United Nations General Assembly when majority of UN countries supported Ukrainian declaration on the third anniversary of Russian war against Ukraine, and Ukraine doing its best to have the support of Global South. The trip of Ukraine president to South Africa, it took a lot of time, and especially with President Zelensky schedule. He is absent for a while in Ukraine, but he decided to travel to show respect and to show how important is Global South for Ukraine. And what is really important is that Ukraine is not only stakeholder of food security with Global South, but Ukraine and Global South, we are facing the same challenge. It is post-colonial aggression and post-colonial arrogancy of states, which believes that they have the right to decide the future over the head of legal governments.
And that was Serhiy Leshchenko, advisor to President Zelensky's chief of staff.